Twagulapu si ab ishit that hastisas coaches altiswaf tuftichas. Honorable friends and relatives, it's good to gather here on this land today. Askobalitsa Salit Squally. My name is Askobalitsa Salit, and I'm Nisqually. We give thanks and we honor our ancestors for these teachings. So when I was a little girl, we used to come down to Frank's Landing, and there were lots of fishermen down here. A lot of people launched their canoes and their fishing boats down here, fished all along the river, all the way out to the mouth, all the way out to Solo Point, Lure Beach. And there were many fishermen that launched their boats here, and we were all children at the time. There's a big maple tree over there, and if you couldn't find us, that's where we were. I'm talking like 20 to 30 kids. His first wife, Norma, used to babysit us all the time, cook lots of meals, and we had to serve out each child and every single one. But what I remember about Uncle Billy the most is fishing and fighting for fishing rights. We went to Olympia where they did a fish-in 1969. I think it was 1969 or 1970. And in the movie, As Long as the Rivers Run, my father, who's Frank Mounts, was the other gentleman that was setting out the net. And he was with my cousin, Ray McLeod. And in the movie, they show, kind of gets me emotional every time I talk about it or see it, but they show him setting out the net, because all along fishing along the Nisqually River there were a lot of game wardens. They used to come and pull our nets, take our motors, take our salmon, take our fishing boats, and confiscate everything during the fishing season. And they only pretty much did it during fishing season. So therefore, that's where the protests came in. But there were also beatings. My dad got beat up on the side of the river. My brothers got beat up on the side of the river. They took our fishing gear. They took all of everything that we used to fish, confiscated them to where the point where you had to renew and renew and renew. And back in those days, we didn't have a whole bunch of money. You know, that was our livelihood. That was how we survived. That's what we lived off of. We used to have a wooden burning stove that we cooked on. We cooked deer meat, we cooked elk meat. We gathered fruits and vegetables along the river, the prairie across the way, which they have now fenced off, considered to be JBLM. There was carrots, there was celery, there was onions, there was roots, and there was camas, and there was apples and cherries that we used to gather over there. And they have since fenced it off. They put us on the other side of the river when they condemned the land in 1917, and taken away all of our traditional practices of the foods that we used to survive on, that we used to live on, which in my eyes felt like they were, what do you call that? Genocide. To me, that's what it felt like, because they took us away from all of our natural foods. People started eating different kinds of foods, greasy foods, and therefore a lot of people got diabetes, cancers, smallpox came through in the early 1900s. But that's what Uncle Billy fought for, was those fishing rights of all those foods that we used to gather on the river. And when they did the fish in downtown Olympia, they beat up Uncle Billy, they beat up my dad, and they arrested all three of them, and my cousin Raymond. But it was about showing the public, about showing the media. All of the students from Evergreen State College, from South Puget Sound Community College, they came and helped us and supported us in this protest, because they wanted the public to see what they were actually doing to all of our fishing. There's hundreds and hundreds of fish-ins that people did not see on the side of the river. People were getting beat up, and they had those wooden billy clubs, I think they call them. That's what they hit my uncle, my dad, my brothers, my grandpa, and all, my great uncles. All of those guys got beat with those clubs because they wanted to take them away from the river, fishing on the river, because they called it illegal, not acknowledging the Medicine Creek Treaty the supreme law of the land. We have just as much rights as the state of Washington with the Medicine Creek Treaty. But they didn't recognize that, they refused to recognize that, and they did not want to acknowledge that the tribes had fishing rights all up and down the I-5 corridor, all the way up into Canada. All of these tribes have these fishing rights. Uncle Billy fought for that. He recognized each and every one of the 29 tribes in Washington state, all the way into Canada, all the way over to Hawaii, all the way into Alaska, and recognized and acknowledged each and every one of those tribes who were fighting for their fishing rights, who were fighting for their hunting rights, who were fighting for their gathering rights, and supported each and every one of them. He didn't fight for just this tribe, he fought for all of the tribes in the Pacific Northwest. What I remember about him is he always put his hand out, and then he grabbed your shoulder and pulled you in for one of the biggest hugs, and he'd say, "God damn, it's good to see you." And that was his words. If you talk to anybody that knew Uncle Billy, that's how he met you, that's how he comforted you, and we were always good and glad to see him. That's what I remember about him most. But one thing that he did tell me about the language. So his father was Willie Frank Sr. He recorded 7 or 8 cassette tapes in 1960, I want to say 69 to 74, of language, along with Gene Sanders down here at Frank's Landing. And we have since translated and transcribed those into booklets. And that was a really huge project because Grandpa Willie spoke so fluently and we couldn't keep up with the way that he spoke it because it was so fast. He spoke really fast, and I always thought, and I always told the girls when we were deciphering this, I bet you he's up there laughing at us because we had to slow it down for us to recognize what he was actually saying. But what Uncle Billy said, you keep teaching that language and you bring it home and teach it to the children, teach your children's children. In the words of Chief Leshai, teach your children's children. And that's what we're doing with the language program, is providing what he said to me, keep teaching that language, bring it alive, bringing it here to Wahilu Indian School. And yeah, that's what I remember most about him. But he was very loving. He loved all of the people, never thought about just himself, always thought about all of the tribes. When he included a meeting, and the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission was about all of the tribes in Washington state, all the way out to Macau. He went out there to eat the whale that they caught, which was, I wish I could have went out there. I didn't get to go out there, but I think that was like one of the memorable moments because they have pictures of him standing with the whale on the beach. That's what I think about the most, is he didn't think about just this tribe, he thought about all the tribes. I would say Si'ab Kolashkid, because he was, Si'ab means most highly respected. We would call him like a hereditary chief. In my eyes, that's how I see Uncle Billy, for what he did for us, for all of us to be here today on this land, fighting for our land, fighting for our water, fighting for our fishing rights, fighting for their gathering rights, and fighting for all of the tribes in the Pacific Northwest. We recognize and we acknowledge that our grandparents, our great-grandparents were taken away from their homes. There was a 100-foot cedar home up in Roy, Washington, and there was 2 smaller ones. There was 7 families that lived in that cedar home, and they all spoke the Lushootseed language, which we call Squally. And during that time, our grandparents, when the army came, or when the missionaries came, they came and took our grandparents away from their homes, not acknowledging and recognizing, this is who you are, this is where you come from. And they were whipped, including my grandmother, my great aunts, my great uncles, told stories about how they were whipped, how they were beaten with a leather strap. Their hands were smacked with wooden rulers for speaking the language. They were taken away from their families. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional here. They were taken away from their families, sent to Tulalip, sent to Puyallup. Some were sent to California to not be near the lands because there was a couple of them that ran away. Oh, I thought that was a salmon. There was a couple of them that ran away, so they sent them further distance, but they took them away from their lands, recognizing, I think, what the non-natives thought when we were speaking our language, that it was some sort of ceremony or some sort of offensive action that we were taking against the non-native peoples. And they forbid us to speak our language. And so revitalizing the language has helped our people come together in a healing manner to recognize the potlatch ceremony, the canoe journey ceremony, the naming ceremonies, the memory ceremonies, and brought the people together to recognize and acknowledge those traditional teachings of our ancestors, how we would offer food, how we would give thanks to our ancestors, how we would bring water to the elders, how we would do the biggest giveaway. Chief Leshai was known. There's a story told about Chief Leshai that he emptied out his whole entire house, which was a cedar house. He emptied all of his cupboards, everything that he could give, and did a 4-day potlatch ceremony and gave away everything in his home to the people to recognize, which this Nisqually people are actually known for, is a giveaway. They thank everybody, they give thanks to everybody for coming. This water right here, there's also another water across the way called Sufdada. And Sufdada means healing water. They call it Shinanam Creek or Medicine Springs Creek. Translating and transcribing what non-native Europeans were trying to spell or say in our Lushootseed language has been so challenging for us, because there was so many people that tried to keep the language alive. And I appreciate the recordings that they did, George Gibbs, you know, and the other recorders, but trying to translate and transcribe what they were trying to say was, you know, been really challenging. We've practiced so many deciphering what they were trying to spell, or what actual, there's a za, a ku, a kwa, ha, all of those sounds that they were trying to spell in English, trying to record what our language keepers were saying. I think listening to Grandpa Willie's tapes made me realize in my hutch, which we call it, this right here, everything right here is called your hutch. Whatever's inside of you shall be. But hearing to him speak the language when I was a young girl, I was there when they were doing the recordings, because my mom used to be the chore worker for Grandpa Willie and Angeline. And she used to clean their house and, you know, wash their dishes, cook their food. I used to walk Grandpa along the river right here because they were well into, I think he was 100. I'm not sure how old Grandma was, but he needed help because he had a cane and he just wanted to walk the river. Listening to those tapes inspired me. But my Uncle Leonard, his name was Salip Tuptki, and which was my great-grandfather, David Squally, and his wife was Obalitza, whose name I inherited. And he gave me, my Uncle Leonard gave me that Indian name, and he said, "You can have this name if you can tell me what it means." And so I researched the name into the Squally archives, wasn't there. Went to Puyallup tribe, researched it into their archives, had to write a letter to Tribal Council to get approval to review the documents, but she gave testimony in 1868, I believe that the date on the testimony was, which had her Indian name on it. And so that's all I needed was the Indian name. When I was walking out and I met my cousin, and she said, "You know, just by the way, we're starting a language program, a teacher certification training program if you're interested." And I jumped right on that. My job had ended at the youth center, so I jumped right on that in 2006 and traced the name through Puyallup tribe, went to the language program and studied, which Obalitza means fine weaver, as Annie Squally was a fine weaver of cedar root baskets. She wove baskets that were super tight, that used to cook food in. They would boil water, put it in the basket, put hot rocks in there, and they would cook food that way. Cedar root baskets are some of the hardest baskets to make. And when Uncle Leonard gave me that name, and I studied it and found out what it meant, I still had, at this point, have made half of my way to the direction of who she was and what she was. I am a weaver, but I'm also a language keeper, so I'm halfway there. But I just want to become a fine weaver, as her baskets were made out of cedar root baskets. And so if you look at the trees right now, you can see that all of the trees all of the roots are underneath the ground. So going up and gathering cedar roots and taking them down and taking them apart. So you have to dig up the root, you have to pull it apart, and then you split it 4 ways and wrap them together and wind. And then she had the most beautiful designs on them. We've got to, Dr. Larson took us to the Washington State Museum, and we got to see some of her baskets, and I just hugged them, because in how I think and how I feel about who she was and what she was so inspirational to who I am and what I've become today because of her teachings. She didn't speak English, she only spoke the language, and she was a master weaver. Her baskets are all over in the Washington State Museum. They have a whole bunch of them over in Gig Harbor, where her and David lived. When I taught at Chief Fletch High Schools, which was kind of shocking to me that nobody knew about it, I showed the movie As Long as the Rivers Run, and the majority of those, and I also had the allotment map for Puyallup tribe and the allotment map for Nisqually tribe, which was a whole teaching curriculum for me. But I put it up on the wall, and I put the other one on the other side, because one's Nisqually and the other one's Puyallup, but we're both intertwined and related with each other's. And I showed the movie As Long as the Rivers Runs, and while they were watching that, I had put the allotment maps up there, and the kids were like, they were shocked. And I wanted them to realize and acknowledge what Uncle Billy fought for, what my dad fought for, what all of the people down here at Frank's Landing fought for, and what they had to do to get the Bolt decision get passed, and recognize that we were fighting for our fishing rights, but what it took to fight for our fishing rights, what our ancestors had to go through to fight for our fishing rights. None of them had ever seen that movie. None of them had recognized that. Some of the kids were almost in tears because they said, "That's my grandma." They had never seen that movie before, so it was very, very important for them to acknowledge and bear witness to that. Then after the movie was over, there was a few of them that were very emotional. So I had cold water, which is sufdada, the healing water. So you always recognize you got to heal that hutch inside when you get emotional and sentimental about that. And then I had put up the 2 allotment maps. I gave everybody little sticky notes, and I said, I want you to go up there and recognize your grandparents or your great-grandparents. And about 30 kids from well, I would say 15 or 20 from each classroom got up and put their sticker on that wall, because their name was an ancestral name. And then after that, these are the teachings that Willie Frank gave to us. We're going to do a naming ceremony, because he had named so many children down here at Frank's Landing. So I taught Lashutsi the alphabet, and I taught the animals. And so I put a bunch of animal names inside of a little bucket, and we gave everybody a little naming ceremony at the school, which was very, very important. I had some of the grandparents, some of the great-grandparents personally come in and shake my hand and say thank you for teaching the language to our children, because this is what they had left behind for us, and they haven't had this much teaching. They're going home and they're teaching it to the little siblings. Dutch oats, ali, sloof, boo, salat, salachi, tsooks, takachi, ho, parats. The little baby, 2 years old, the young boy went home and was teaching his 2-year-old sister the language. And then, and that in itself is part of the teachings for keep the fishing rights going, but they recognize what it took for our ancestors to fight for. And I don't know if they're still teaching that, but they need to. We're teaching it to the other school districts as well. Uncle Billy and Grandpa Willie told us a story about Chushid. Chushid is the stars being shot out of the sky and they went into the earth, and what arose from the ground was our people. And that was a relationship that we had with our Mother Earth. But also Grandpa Willie tells a story about how our people went into the water and related with the salmon people. And our salmon people came to life, walked onto the water, walked onto the earth, and arose as a human being. These are stories that Grandpa Willie told, and Uncle Billy kept them going in acknowledgement and recognition of who we are and where we came from. Schadad. Schadad Iishid means our salmon family. Ole means prairie, and people love the grass. And like I said, the reservation boundaries were up in Fort Lewis, where Willie Frank Sr. lived in a 100-foot cedar home. There were 7 families living in that cedar home, which we called longhouses, big houses, cedar homes. There was 2 smaller ones beside that. But the purpose of us living over there on that side of because there was camas roots, there was berries, there was potatoes, onions, celery, and bear root that used to grow over there. There were berries, blackberries, apples, cherries that grew over on the prairie, which we all survived on. And today we don't have access to that, and that's what caused a lot of sicknesses in the people. We do a lot of teach-ins for the students, but I think it would be a really cool project to bring the youth together and have them watch that video, watch that movie, and have them come together and do a short little skit of them in acknowledgement of the story of Billy Frank, of the fishing rights, of the water rights, of, Tacotma, where we go up to gather our huckleberries, which we're getting ready to go do right now, where my Obelitza, where she gathered at, my great-grandmother, driving them up there when I was like 12 years old. So a lot, back in the day, a lot of kids drove because there wasn't so many rulings, but drove them up there to the area where we go pick huckleberries. And this year, I'm on my 6th generation of taking that many generations of family members to that site. My grandchildren and my great-grandchildren are getting ready to go this year, so that will be the 7th generation. Willie Frank, Angeline, Billy Frank, Obelitza, and Salat Tuptki left behind for us that we have to travel up to keep our people healthy. We go up every single day and pick berries on a daily basis. We go up at 10 o'clock, come down by 5, have dinner, go straight back up there every single day that they're there, and offer tobacco, offer sage. I'm teaching my grandchildren. They all have sage in their hand, and this is the prayer that they say. Ochacha shaksiya bad, dai hatisas kochas, altiswaf tuftachas, altadishet. Gwakafat boot, altisache, gwagwatlu hali ilchas, altisache, gwagwatlu ulach ilchas, altisache, gwagwatlu ibash akwitsahagzab, altisache, gwagwatlu hat akwitsahoy, altisache, ok adeitsu chatwalti, hali il sali il, ulach il, ishet. Yaftid siaya, yaftid buk up buf atsil tel buf swaf tufted. Tech duf ishid, tech duf siaya, tech duf buk up buf atsil tel buf swaf tufted. Egg with the beatsy chen. Oh, basista. Our sacred Father above, we give thanks to you for this land today. Would you help us on this day? Would you help us do good on this day? Would you strengthen us today? Would you help us heal on this day? Would you help us walk tall on this day? Would you protect our people, our Iishin, on this day? And we honor you and we thank you. So the kids, it's a funny story. So my granddaughter and I were picking berries, and we were up there for 2 days, and the berries were still green. And she's like, Grandma, they're just green everywhere where we go. There's a lot of people up there picking berries. But I said, you know what we forgot? We forgot our sage. We didn't bring it up for 2 days, and we didn't make an offering. So I went and fixed a plate of food that we had, like a bite of sandwich. So you always have to offer, give thanks to your ancestors. So we offered a plate of food and put it up in the tree and and made a sandwich with some chips, strawberries, blueberries, what we had for lunch. And then we stood around and we said a prayer. And then after that, I said, let's go down this way, because there was a raven. He kept flying over us. And I said, he's yelling at us, and he's telling us there's berries over here. So we went across the road, and they ended up picking up like this much berries just between the three of them. And I said, see, and that's what it takes. You have to give thanks to the ancestors for providing this sustenance for us. We traveled up and down the river, and going across the river was no problem for us, but there was a lot of wadach. Those are the mountain berries. Stugwut is the blackberry. We gathered salmon berries, blackberry, trailing berries, thimble berries. After we got done cooking our salmon, then we would go, wet our throat down with the berries, because they were so juicy back in the day. And to us, they were huge because we're just little kids, right? But there was so many of them, They were so plentiful. I love berry juice. I love berry pie. And I love berry jam. And the best thing that we do at Huckleberry Camp, my granddaughter, she just turned 13, but she learned how to make her first huckleberry pancake when she was 9 years old. And so it's not easy to flip a pancake if you're 9 years old, but we put the pancake dough on there, let it cook, and then sprinkle huckleberries on it. You have to try that. That's the best. So even the students recognized tears coming out of my eyes, because as a child, you bear witness to people beating your brothers, your uncles, your dad, your grandpa, your uncles, your great uncles. You don't understand why. You don't understand racism as a child, and that's exactly what it was. It was racism. The game wardens coming in and beating, and you try to run in there. So my mom kind of forbid us from going to some of these events, because you just wanted to go down there and you wanted to save them, you wanted to protect them. And why are they doing this to my dad, my uncle, for fishing? We didn't understand that, and it was very, very hurtful. It kind of broke my heart and gave me a different mindset of who we were as Native people, which was part of the teaching for the purpose and reason of showing that to those children at the school, because it gave them a different mindset of how to understand what our ancestors, what our relatives had to go through to have fishing rights, to have water rights, to have hunting rights, to have gathering rights. And those were the teachings that came behind. And it was very hurtful for them too, because they watched their grandma's arm get twisted and kneeled and thrown down to the ground, or their uncle being handcuffed, and they just literally lifted him up off the ground by his shoulders, or his arms were handcuffed. He was laying on the ground, and they just grabbed his elbows and lifted him up. So that hurt his body. It hurt him in a manner that you don't, maybe that's what happened. They wanted the people to be so hurt, because if they hurt them, they couldn't fish, or they couldn't hunt, or they couldn't gather. And that was the intent, just like I said earlier, genocide. We were part of sorry, I'm getting emotional here. But I'll just say that it was very, very hurtful. It's still today. Breaks my heart to watch the movie from 1969 to 1970, 71, 72. But revitalizing the water rights, protecting the water rights. So many streams, that flow into the Nisqually River, Clear Creek, Muck Creek, Squally, all of these streams that bring salmon back into our river. Protecting those water rights, not from here, all the way up to Mount Rainier, is what needs to be done. And that's what we need to do, is teach those children this is what we have to do to protect our salmon, to protect our gathering rights, to protect our treaty rights. I actually have a shirt on. It's called Medicine Creek Treaty, Nisqually Tribe Replanting the Treaty Tree. A couple of years ago, we got a seedling from the original treaty tree, which was over here on Billy Frank Jr. Refuge. That fell down many years ago. But I contacted a gentleman, Bob Barnes, who helped me get one of the original seedlings from the treaty tree itself from 1854. And I planted it at Nisqually Tribe, and that's the tree that's growing out in front of the tribe today to teach the people to recognize the treaty, to acknowledge what's written in the treaty, and practice the teachings that are written in the treaty, which all of what we were promised in 1854. We gave testimony over in Washington, D.C. in regards to the language and how it was taken away. But the children, they don't see what happened to our ancestors. You know, they make a lot of movies about non-natives, about how they depict Native American people as savages. I myself was called a savage. I went into Statutory Hall, and the depiction that's way above all of the statues was some of the Iroquois with a hatchet in their hand. And the depiction that they provide for non-native people of who we are as people is not what we are. And that's what gets me mad, so angry and so mad, because the depiction of what they make us out to be is not who we are. We had religion. We practiced traditional medicines. We practiced our language. We practiced traditional teachings for all of our people. We had rules, we had regulations, we had traditional law. And in their eyes, when they came to this territory, they said we didn't have those things, and they called us savages, and we were dirty people. But we were some of the most healthiest people in the world, actually, because of how we were raised, what foods we survived on, how we were surviving from the Nisqually River, for that matter. All of the creeks and streams up into the Roy Washington area where Muck Creek runs through, yeah. Uncle Billy was I think he'd be deeply honored and recognizing how people foresaw him as a tribal leader. And in what I think and what I feel for Uncle Billy, we should have recognized him as a hereditary chief because of what he did and what he fought for. What he sacrificed for was for the people, not for the individual, for the people. And when I say people, we call them Atzil Talbuf, and that's all people. Atzil Talbuf, Buck Buf, Atzil Talbuf, Swaftufted, all the people of this land. And this land belongs all across Mother Earth. And what he fought for was that. It wasn't for, he wasn't selfish about what he was fighting for. He fought for all of the people, for the water rights, everything, which was most important to our people.